So the famous video for that of them is doing that thing where they're walking on the treadmills and they do the whole treadmill thing. Um, what they ended up doing was doing that on the 2006 MTV Awards.
Hey there, welcome to a Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing that game. It's just an excuse to talk about records. Play with my brother, Plastic Eric from the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel, and you can follow along with us and play along with us by subscribing to both channels. So, in Eric's last video, he talked about My Chemical Romance, the Black Parade. That is a band that I've been aware of basically since they've been around. But was never really exposed to in their sound. I kind of knew what to expect, kind of a heavy emo thing. And I've heard tracks here and there, but never necessarily sat down and listened to the entire album or got a real strong sense of what just their sound was. I certainly knew what their aesthetic was and what to expect. But guess the thing that threw me off most is the vocalist's sort of nasal over enunciation. Really hard on the R's at times. That surprised me a little bit. Listening to it, you could see how it might be conceived as something that would be right up my alley. In some ways, they seem like the 2000s answer to the Smiths. But mostly what I got out of it from this remove of however long it is, 16 years, is that it made me think of a lot of things. Sound-wise, it made me think of Pink Floyd and Queen, sort of the theatricality and grandiosity of those two acts blended together. And let me see, the song titles. That was the thing I really focused in on, I guess, was the song titles. And every song made me think, it felt like of something else. The End made me think of the Doors. Dead made me think of They Might Be Giants. This Is How I Disappear made me think of How to Disappear Completely from Radiohead. Going through Cancer made me think of Joe Jackson. Mama made me think of Genesis. Famous Last Words made me think of Supertramp. But for my connection, I zeroed in on the song Disenchanted, which made me think of my connection. That connection being the 1986 self-titled debut album from the Communards. This album has a track on it called Disenchanted. So it's basically the connection. Both albums have a song called Disenchanted on it. Maybe a little less common of a word. Not necessarily a $5 word, but not something that you hit on too much in song titles. The Communards, you may or may not know, are made up from Jimmy Somerville, who started off as the lead singer for Bronski Beat, and was there. He sang the lead in Small Town Boys, which was or Small Town Boy singular, which was the landmark single kind of that was openly gay, and it was a song about coming out as gay and sort of being rejected, by your family because of it. But he only lasted for the one album, The Age of Consent, in Bronski Beat. My personal experience with Bronski Beat actually started with their next album. So Jimmy Somerville was no longer the singer, but Truth Dare Double Dare, which had Hit That Perfect Beat, which was kind of a jam for me back when it came out. And sort of through a bizarre reverse engineering, when the Communards came out, I was aware that Jimmy Somerville was in it, was, the singer, and that he had been in Bronski Beat. But I still didn't really know Small Town Boy at that point. It was something I had read about in Spin Magazine without ever really being exposed to it. It's back in the 80s, and you heard what you were fed unless you went out and bought the music, and I didn't buy it, so I hadn't really heard it. It wasn't played on the radio or anything like that. But I did catch I'm trying to remember at this removed because it was a cassette. I've owned this 3 times, or bought it, purchased it 3 times. I owned it on cassette, was the original way I ingested it, and it was fairly early on in my buying of music for myself. And so it's one of those albums that, first of all, was a reach for me. It was like trying to figure out what it was that I liked musically. And secondarily, it was one that, because I had bought it, I listened to it a lot. So I became very familiar with the whole album in a way that it's imprinted on me, more so than a lot of things these days when you've already got thousands of titles on hand and the ability to listen to infinitely everything else for something to really kind of make that deep, deep impression on you. Which isn't to say that I loved it, oddly. And yet it made enough of an impression on me that when I got rid of my cassettes, I bought it on CD. And like a lot of those early CDs, CD issues from the 80s, when a remaster came out, I went and got that. So I actually have 2 copies of it here. My original CD, don't have the original cassette anymore, and my 2 CD remaster expanded version. Now, the infuriating thing about this album is that this CD, the first CD, had not different songs, but sort of different edits of the songs than were on the cassette. And so when this came out, I thought, oh, finally I'm going to be able to cure that. And yet this 2 CD version contains edits that were not on either the original cassette or on this. And so I've held on to both because this one did not completely make this one obsolete. Didn't make it redundant. So it's annoying to have all these different sort of edits. I believe that Communards were really around the club track, based around like really long tracks that were probably then edited down either for single purpose or in the case of maybe the first CD, just the ability to cram them all onto the single disc. But as an act, it's a duo that's Jimmy Somerville and Richard Coles, who I became aware of much, much, much later, watching things from the BBC on YouTube, that he shows up now all the time on panels, panel shows in England. And he's the Reverend Richard Coles, and I'd seen him again and again on these panel shows, and it took a while for it to ever click through that. I think they mentioned it maybe, and so it wasn't even that it clicked through. It was like I was told. I was like, oh crap, that's the guy from the Communards. But the music is profoundly silly at times. I really like the disco-y songs, the sort of unabashed dance club tracks, like Disenchanted, like Don't Leave Me This Way, and You Are My World, Heavens Above. Those all I just think are pretty good. The other songs run a gamut from just profoundly silly, and I'm talking like, speaking to Eric directly here, Eve of the War, silly, War of the Worlds, silly. La Dolorosa, the second song on here, is kind of overwrought and windswept and, Lawrence of Arabia through the first part. But man, when it kicks in after a long intro, it's really hard just not to bust out laughing. And on the other side, there's Breadline Britain, which is just a great piano and vocal track. That's very political. The name Communards, they named themselves after a political faction or movement or something like that, that had proclaimed Paris as its own individual country during some occupation or another. Obviously, the name suggests communism. The look has that sort of Red Star communist propaganda look to it as well, especially with the backwards R. I'm rambling at this point, but it's great in spite of being kind of silly. It's super cheesy, and it's hard to maybe stand up and proclaim it as I love this record. And I wouldn't say that I'd love this record, but I have enjoyed it enough that I bought it 3 times over. And even the silly stuff is okay. And there's nothing that I think is terrible. I just think some of it is cringe-inducingly silly, and made sillier by the fact that I don't think that it's tongue-in-cheek. I don't think it's not like They Might Be Giants. It's not absurdism. It's something taken so seriously that you almost can't help but laugh. And I wanted to mention also to Eric, if he ever wants to give it a listen, that the song, I think it's just Reprise. It's just called Reprise, even though it is track number 4. Also has a bit of a Arabian desert feel to it, but it really makes me think of Queen's Teo Toriate, We Cling Together, that song. Something about the feel of that makes me think of that song every time I listen to it. But all that said, I'm going to throw this over to Eric to try to make a connection to. My connection again with a song called Disenchanted, which is both on My Chemical Romance's Black Parade and my choice, 1986 self-titled debut from the Communards. And that's all I have. Until next time, bye-bye.